We measure brain waves. When your brain is active and you are present and you're aware and you have your attention on your body, you have your attention on your environment, and you have your attention on time, your brain's job is to create coherence between the outer world and the inner world, to create meaning. And a lot of information that's coming into your brain causes your brain to move into what's called beta brainwaves. If you close your eyes and you have less information coming into your brain, and all of a sudden, the less sensory information, you're no longer seeing, and there's soft music playing in the background, and you're not getting up and walking and experiencing or tasting or feeling, the less sensory information in your brain causes your brain waves to slow down into alpha. And in alpha, you tend to pay attention more to your inner world and less attention on your outer world. And you tend to think in pictures instead of the voice that's always talking to you in your head. And this is a very creative state. And then, of course, if your body starts to fall asleep and your mind is awake, now you're in this state called theta, and the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind opens up very wide. And then there's delta, which is when a person falls asleep in restorative sleep, but now we have brain measurements of people in delta, and their brain is doing something very different. And their bodies sound asleep, but they are super lucid, and they're having a very transcendental moment. Now take a look at gamma. Gamma is an aroused state, a very, very superconscious state where the brain is producing a whole lot more energy in there. And it looks a lot like the stress state in high beta, but it's not, because it's a faster frequency and it has a different signature. And I want to talk about the difference today between gamma and high beta, because I want to show you what happens when a person's brain switches on and connects to the field. So here's delta, 0.5 to 4 seconds. Here's theta, 4 to 8 cycles per second. Here's alpha. Here's low-level beta. Here's mid-range beta. Here's high beta. Look, here's gamma running right alongside high beta, and some gammas are even faster. That's a aroused state. So in high beta, you can be aroused from from some stress in your life. But when we have a high level of gamma in the brain, the arousal is not taking place from anything out there. The arousal is actually energy moving from the body up into the brain. And this whole system opens up. A gate at the brainstem opens up, and all the energy that you use for ejaculation or orgasm, all the energy that you use to digest a meal, all the energy that you use for the fight or flight response, instead of it being released out, is being released up, and that gate opens up, and the brain goes into a very, very super aroused state, and that state is super consciousness. So check it out. When you're born, you're totally subconscious mind, because children's brain waves are very slow for the first 6 years of their life. They have no analytical mind. So big boys don't cry. Little girls should be seen and not heard. You're not very good at math. Money is the root of all evil. And people take that information as children in all the way into their subconscious, and they begin to learn by these positive and negative identifications and associations that give rise to what we call our habits or our behaviors. A good example of positive identification is when you're young and you cry out for milk. You learn to associate crying out with being fed, so you develop a behavior that's constructive. A good example of a negative association is putting your finger in the light socket. And the moment you notice a change in your internal state, you pay attention to what's causing it in your outer world, and your brainwaves start to pick up more and more because you're paying more attention to the outer world. And somewhere between the ages of 6 and 9, as brainwaves change, we develop our analytical mind. And our analytical mind acts as a barrier or a filter to separate our conscious mind from our subconscious mind. Our conscious mind is 5% of our total mind. It's made up of things like logic and reasoning, which gives rise to our creativity, our will, our faith. And then 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old are all these memorized programs subconsciously. So then the analytical mind is always deciding what's good and bad, what's right and wrong, what's positive, what's negative, what's past, what's future. The analytical mind helps us to reason and discern in our life. But when you throw in the hormones of stress, the arousal causes us to overly analyze. How many people have been under stress and you just can't stop thinking? That's when the brain moves into those high elevated states. The whole purpose of meditation, though, is to slow your brain waves down, get beyond the analytical mind, and enter the operating system where you're taking these limited beliefs or limited behaviors or limited habits and changing them into more constructive ones. That means then You can't do it with your conscious mind. You got to get beyond your analytical mind and enter this operating system. So some people have a very thin analytical mind, and when they have a thin analytical mind, they're more suggestible to information. Others of us have a little bit more of a dense analytical mind, and we have to work a little harder to get beyond it. But there's a formula that we use to teach people how to do it, and anybody can do it once they understand the formula. So the more analytical you are, the less suggestible you are to information. And suggestibility is your ability to accept, believe, and to surrender to information without analyzing it. The less analytical you are, the more suggestible you are to information. Now that's important because when your brain moves into trance and you slow your brain waves down, you tend to be less analytical and you tend to be more suggestible. If you get driven by the hormones of stress and now your brain is overly analytical, it's not a good time to learn. It's not a good time to take information in. So we know how to induce trance now in our work. And when a person is in trance, they're more suggestible. That means their brain waves slow down and they're less analytical. When you look at a television screen, your brain, for the most part, is in alpha. You're like this. And then here comes the commercial. You know, Gene, as you age, your immune system gets weaker and weaker and weaker. Or you need this flu shot. And everybody takes that in without analyzing it. So then you got to slow your brain waves down. You got to go from this high-range beta to the mid-range beta to the low-level beta. You got to cross the analytical mind, and when you do, brain waves slow down, and now you're in the operating system. So beta leads to what? Alpha. Alpha leads to what? Theta leads to what? And we can say that beta and alpha represent the conscious mind, and alpha, theta, and delta represent the subconscious mind. Are you with me still? So as you slow your brain waves down, you move right out of your thinking neocortex, and consciousness begins to flow right into the subconscious centers of the brain. And your limbic brain is the seat of your autonomic nervous system. And your autonomic nervous system is the automatic nervous system that keeps you healthy. And when you begin to connect to the autonomic nervous system, all of a sudden then it begins to do a better job in healing you. So then many people spend a lot of their time stressed out by the hormones of stress, and they could never change their brain waves to get in the operating system to reprogram their body again. And they can think positively all they want with the 5% of their conscious mind in their neocortex, but that thought has no effect on the body's automatic system. Learn how to slow your brain waves down, and you drop a thought in here, all of a sudden begins to reprogram the autonomic nervous system. And we have great research to show that that's possible. Now, when we're measuring brain waves, we're not looking for any type of brain waves. We're looking for very organized brain waves, very coherent brain waves. And the more coherent your brain waves are, the more the brain is functioning as a whole in unison. Incoherence is like a group of drummers banging on the drums all at the same time with no rhythm. And your brain, when it's incoherent, you're incoherent. When your heart is not coherent, you don't trust yourself. When your heart is not coherent, you tend to be resentful, impatient, frustrated. And people spend a lot of their time living that way. So then, how do we create coherence in the brain and the heart? Well, when you live by the hormones of stress, and you're trying to control everything in your life, you're shifting your attention from one person to one thing, to one problem, to another person, to another place, to another thing, every one of those elements has a neurological network in your brain. So the arousal of stress causes you then to over-focus on all the things in your life. And as you think about all these problems, you activate all the circuits, and the brain is very incoherent. And under stress, you narrow your focus on the cause, on matter. Teaching people how to open their awareness and focus on nothing is part of the formula. As they begin to go from a convergent focus to a divergent focus, the act of sensing space causes you to stop thinking. And as you stop thinking, you no longer stay in that beta state, and brain waves begin to slow down into alpha, but not just any kind of alpha. All of a sudden, you start to see the brain start to synchronize. More communities of neurons begin to join a bigger community. And what syncs in the brain starts to link in the brain. And all of a sudden, the brain and the heart start functioning in a more coherent way. So if you have a coherent energy, we call that health. We call incoherence disease. And I say, according to the quantum model of reality, all disease is a lowering of frequency in an incoherent message. So if you can lay a coherent signature over an incoherent signature, it's going to entrain it and create more order, and then we call that a healing. How many people are with me? So this is the best way that I can describe coherence in the brain. Let each one of these neurological networks represent, each one of these metronomes represent a neurological network in your brain. Is that coherence or incoherence? So that's disorder, yes? This is a brain that's in high beta, that's under stress. Your brain's not working right. You got a lot of chatter going on in your head. You can't think clearly. But if you start applying the formula and you go from a narrow focus to an open focus and you sense space, sense energy, you put your attention on nothing, the act of connecting to that field begins to create more order in the brain. And if you keep applying it, and you keep applying it, more and more networks of neurons start to synchronize. More order or less order now? If you keep opening your awareness, more and more neurons join the community. More order. It's exactly what happens in the brain and the heart when you apply the formula. More order. More order. Now, check out this stubborn neurological network over here. That's the one that says, I can't, there's something wrong with me, it's too hard, I'll never change, I'm unworthy. But if you keep applying the formula, keep opening your awareness, we've seen this on thousands of brain scans, sooner or later, coherence is going to consume incoherence, and everybody's going to dance to the same rhythm. So we've done thousands and thousands and thousands of brain scans. We measure 19 different compartments of the brain. We measure muscle tension at times, and we measure how the heart interacts with the brain. Now, those 19 compartments of the brain, when they're all dancing to the same